To the extent that we live our lives in a manner that is consistent with the truth in our heart, we thrive.
Welcome to the Meijer Clinic's podcast, and you just heard a quote from one of your hosts, Dr. Lisa Day. Join our licensed clinical professionals from various backgrounds as they discuss fascinating mental health topics with a wide range of guests. Meijer Clinics is a Christian counseling organization with multiple clinics nationwide dedicated to treating the whole person, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Welcome to our listening family. We thank you for joining us. Hi everyone, Kristin Sunanta Walker here, and we're doing a roundtable discussion today with Dr. Paul Meier. Paul, thanks so much for coming on.
Hi, I enjoy being on, helping people in our listening family.
Absolutely, and of course, Melanie Van. Thank you, Melanie, and thanks for the topic for today.
Oh, sure, it's an important one. Absolutely, good to be on with you guys.
Yeah, it's actually 9/10, September 10th. Tomorrow is September 11th, and we know what a big day that is. And today, the 10th of September, is World Suicide Prevention Day. So I think we're all going to be feeling quite emotional because of today. And then as we go into how 9/11 affected everyone, uniquely and also commonly, as we go into tomorrow. But we're going to not have this be a depressing show. We're going to talk about hope in here as well. So I'm going to start off with you, Melanie, which you're probably going to be like, what? Start with Paul. But let's
start with Melanie.
Let's start with you, Melanie, on what did you see today that made you realize this? And you're the one who we said, Melanie picks the topic this week.
Well, I try to stay in front of the national observances for our website so I can honor those whenever I can. And when I typed that in today, of course, World Suicide Prevention Day came up, and September is actually Suicide Prevention Month or Suicide Awareness Month. I'm not 100% sure which, but that being said, I thought it would be a great topic to talk about. Before we get into the show, I wanted to offer a couple of numbers, and then we'll offer them again at the end of the show. It's the National Suicide Prevention Line. It's 1-800-273-TALK or 1-800-273-8255. You can also text the word START in caps, S-T-A-R-T, to 741-741, and you'll start to receive messages there. So if any of our listeners are having thoughts about suicide, you can certainly use those two things to reach out to, and hopefully that'll give you the extra needed support that you need if you're in that place. So I just wanted to put those out there.
And what does being in that place mean, Paul?
Well, when suicide hotline would be, and if you don't remember these numbers, all you got to do is Google suicide hotline, But suicide hotline is if somebody's feeling acutely suicidal at the moment and they need to talk to somebody immediately, then that would be a good thing to do. It's not the cure. You need seek professional help, counseling, and you may or may not need medication as well. And you can you need to get in to see a psychiatrist or a counselor. It takes a while sometimes to get in to see a psychiatrist, but you can get in to see a counselor almost immediately. And people can call our number too, 1-888-7-CLINIC. And if we don't have a clinic in your city, which we probably don't, we've got a chain, but just they're not in a lot of cities. And but we can help you find somebody in your area. So treatment takes time, but a hotline's for if you feel like it right now and you're afraid you're afraid you might.
So when someone's at that place, I always wonder, when someone's in that place where they're afraid that they might, that the fear is there of what they're going to do. And that fear is, to me, a bit of hope because
Yeah,
they're reaching out. It's the people that don't want to call. How do we reach those people is what I think about, that they're so beyond hope that they don't even want to call. They really don't want to be here. So, what are your thoughts around that, Melanie?
Well, I mean, depression is such a tricky thing because so often, a lot of times when a person has major depressive disorder, you don't, one of the major symptoms of that is that you don't reach out to people. You become secluded. You stop doing things with your friends and family. You don't pick up your phone. You're not calling people. You're not socializing like you used to. So there's less chance that someone would actually be able to see that there's really a problem going on. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges is that the very nature of major depressive disorder is that you don't socialize. So if you have a family member, a friend, a coworker, anyone that you know is suffering from depression, then I think the best thing to do is just stay in communication. And that doesn't mean I found tons of lists today in doing research about what to say to someone that's majorly depressed or what to say to someone that you know is struggling with suicide ideation. And it's not everything's going to be okay. That's not always the best thing to say.
Right.
And these things do matter. This is part of what I was trained to do when I went to school to be a counselor, is they teach you the correct verbiage to use with your clients. And sometimes the best thing to say is, I'm here if you need me. Sometimes the best thing to do is just literally to show up and not say a word. Maybe just take them, some soup, or go sit with them, or go wash their clothes, or wash their dishes for them because they may not be doing them. And then you ask those hard questions. I posted that on our site today. And I think that's one of the most important things is you just need to ask, are you contemplating suicide? Do you want to kill yourself, or do you not want to be here anymore? Because sometimes people don't want to say that they want to kill themselves. So you can say it in a different way. And then if they answer yes, then you can ask them, do you have a plan? And that will let you know if the person actually has, thoughts of how they're actually going to do it. And if they do have a plan, then honestly, the best thing to do is try to get them to the hospital somewhere. And then they can be admitted as harm to self, and you may be saving someone's life.
Right.
Pick up the phone and make an appointment at a counseling office. If the person doesn't have insurance, then take them to the local clinic. Just do it. If someone is in that position, then sometimes a friend or family member has to take over and just make sure that the person, is well taken care of, because they're not in a position where they can make decisions themselves. So this is hard stuff for our listeners. Like, this is not, it's not easy. I've been around people that were suicidal, and it's very difficult energy to stand in. It's
Mm-hmm.
just really hard, and it takes a lot of brevity to listen to that gut feeling that I've had most of the times, knowing that someone was in trouble. And when you get that feeling, you just need to have the courage to speak up and to do something and to help.
Yeah, people are afraid. A lot of people are afraid. Well, if I ask my teenager or my mate or my friend if they feel like dying, then I'm afraid I'll introduce that idea to them. And don't be afraid of that. If you ask somebody, and when you do ask, you have to be a little bit vague. I'll tell you. I mean, like if I asked every new patient I saw, "Are you suicidal?" Almost 100% would say no. But I ask them, yeah, if they're real depressed. I say, "Well, do you wish God would let you die very often?" They say, "Oh yeah, I feel that way every day." And so they're really passively suicidal, But
Hmm.
to them, are you suicidal means are you planning on doing it today or something like that, So do you have death wishes? And if they say yes, and so don't be afraid to ask that of somebody because they're less likely to do it if they bring it out in the open than they are if they keep it a secret. So
Absolutely.
do you feel do you have death wishes? Do you wish you could die? Do you wish you could be dead? And if they say yes, then I ask them, how would you do it if you did it? And if they say, well, I don't know, I've never thought of a way. I just wish God would let me die. That's encouraging. Um, then there's a lot of hope that they can. I mean, people are going to get well even if they're acutely suicidal if they get help, but they won't need to go right to a hospital or anything like that. But if they say, well, I would use the gun in the cabinet, that at that point I ask them, well, can you promise me that you won't? And they say, yeah, I wouldn't do that, but I've thought about that because then they could go to something like our day program or something where they get acute care. But if they say, yeah, I was planning on doing it tomorrow at noon, and I've been preparing for it, and if they do that, or if you ask them, like Melanie said earlier, can can you promise me that you won't do it? I had that happen to a college girl last week. I asked her that because she really wanted help, but she felt very suicidal. And I said, "Can you promise me that you won't? Because I'd like for you to come in our day program if you can promise me that you won't." And she said, "I can't promise you that I won't." So, we got her to go to a hospital nearby, and I don't treat people in the hospital, but we sent her to a good place nearby, and uh, so she's been there for about 5 or 6 days now, and she's doing well enough where they're going to let her out tomorrow, and she's going to come in our day program and get intensive therapy because now she can promise that she won't. She still feels like dying. She may still have suicidal thoughts, but she can promise that she won't.
Right.
And if you ask people what are the methods that pop into your head, you're not going to convince them to do it because if they talk about the methods, the secret methods that they haven't told anybody that have popped into their head, then again they're less likely to do it. And when you ask them stuff like that, not only are you helping them to bring it out in the open and making it less likely that they'll do it, you can't guarantee that they won't, but make it less likely, but you're also going to have a better idea of what kind of help they need.
I think too with people like Anthony Bourdain and Kate Spade and Robin Williams is an example, that have uh, you know I don't know what the proper term is now because every time you say something next week there's the better way of saying it, but people who have died of suicide, that seem like on the outside they're successful, they've got everything to live for, blah 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 blah, at a different level than maybe people like me as an example. But I think that it's changed the way that we look at suicide, and it's made it, it's not changed the fact that people are suicidal and that do have these thoughts. It's just changed the way that we see it, and that it doesn't matter what's going on in your life, how much money you have, fame, whatever. I think about the people that are really high functioning depressed people, high functioning, and they're suicidal. I've been that person. I've been the planning it, and I've been the I just give me a heart attack right now. So I've been in both of those places, and I don't remember anyone asking me, "Are you feeling suicidal?" I would say I am, but nobody asking me that question. And when I went back and I said later, why didn't you, you know, even to a couple therapists, I asked, why didn't you ask me that? Because I was telling you. And they were kind of shocked. And one of them admitted, well, you just don't see, I mean, you're bright and attractive and you have your own company and you just, you're vivacious. And so you've got, low grade depression. I just didn't think that, I thought you were being dramatic. And I was like, my God, are
Yeah,
you
that's why you got
kidding
to
me?
ask. Uh-huh.
Yeah, you need to ask at every intake. I mean, most intake paperwork if you're filling it out or if your counselor is filling it out, is going to have that question on you. And if it doesn't, you need a better intake form, right, Paul?
Yep.
So I mean, I think what you're saying, Kristen, is that all of our hearts are the same. We're all human beings. We all suffer from soul pain to mental illness. And it's such a big spectrum. And I have seen and heard every path, and I'm sure there's hundreds more to suicide. I mean, one vision of someone that has major depressive disorder and can't seem to get themselves out of bed, that is just one, you know, one image of what it may look like before someone commits suicide. It can be
Yeah.
someone
Right.
high functioning, like you said, Kristen, that's got everything going for them, but underneath, they've struggled with, maybe they've had abuse in their life, maybe they've suffered from
Yep.
major depression all their life, maybe they're bipolar. Sometimes people
Yeah.
commit suicide when they're manic. It's not when they're depressed, but it's when they're manic.
Right.
Then you've got, sometimes people commit suicide in the heat of the moment. There's an argument, there's a mate that's left them, there's something that is very acute that has brought them to the point that they've made a really bad situation. I unfortunately had, and this may, I guess, could be considered triggering for some, but I had a family member that was a young man in his early 20s, and he had been drinking and probably maybe intoxicated with something else, and his girlfriend broke up with him. And before he left her house that night, he committed suicide in her home.
Mhm.
And so this can go on, in any way. There's so many different ways that this can happen. And I don't ever, we talk about what can you do to help, and sometimes you could do everything possible and it still wouldn't matter. So that was
Right.
the point I wanted to make, is that what we're saying tonight is this might save one person's life, but it doesn't mean that if you've done everything you possibly could, sometimes it still doesn't matter if the
Right.
person is committed to doing it. So,
Right.
yeah.
And like Melanie just said, a lot of people aren't necessarily. Most people that commit suicide were depressed first, but a lot of them weren't. Uh, um, something like half of suicides are people that attempt suicide decided to within 5 minutes of when they did it. So a lot of them are impulsive, like the example that you gave, especially when you're young and you've been you got real serious about a relationship, and then you find out your girlfriend or boyfriend or your fiance or your mate has run off with somebody else or just totally shocked you and abandoned you. Then there's even songs that say "I can't live without you" and all that.
Right.
Well, yeah, you can. There's 8 billion people out there, and he or she is just one of them. Yeah, you can live without them. It's going to hurt, but people feel like all is lost, and so they especially when they're young. Somebody that's 45 and somebody abandoned them, well, that might be the fourth or fifth time it happened to them in their life. So they say, well, I survived the other 4 times, so
Right.
it really sucks. It really hurts, but I'll get over it. But a teenager may feel like all is lost. And as far as people that are depressed, if we took, there's thousands of people that in our listening family right now that are listening to this, and most of you are not depressed. Most of you are happy people. But if we took, several thousand of you and injected you with something that made your serotonin get low, you'd be suicidal, maybe an hour from now. And when your serotonin is low, you feel like all is lost. It's never going to get better. It's like you have if you got pets, it's like you have your pet doo doo on your glasses, and everything looks that way in life. And so most people that come that I work up for our day program, for example, feel very depressed. I've had some tell me, if this doesn't work, I'm going to kill myself because it's my last hope. And yet they do get well. And but when you're depressed, it feels like you're not going to. And another thing that I thought of when you were sharing those things is I've got right in front of me from the National Institute of Mental Health some things, and one thing is that as many as 8 out of 10 teens who commit suicide tried to ask for help in some way. Sometimes it's subtle, but they try to ask for help in some way before they committed suicide, such as by seeing a doctor right before the suicide attempt or doing something to sort of hint that they need help. And we're afraid to ask teenagers, and a lot of times they hide it. And according to this huge survey of teenagers, it says more than 1 out of every 12 teenagers had attempted suicide in the previous year.
Mm.
Now, attempted means, only 1 out of 20 times or 30 times that they attempted. A lot of attempts are overdosing on 15 aspirin or which 40 can kill you. 40 Tylenol can kill you. So that's not to be made light of, but lots of times it's I had somebody a few days ago that overdosed on half a dozen Xanax, and it just made them feel better, but so they didn't really want to die, but it was a cry for help.
Right.
But those who but a lot of teenagers do die of suicide. It's the third or fourth leading cause of death in teens, and the suicide rate is about 300% higher now than it was 50 years ago because of a lot of factors. And another thing is that you mentioned success. You see people that are real successful and famous and wealthy and all that. In reality, in every major city in the United States, the highest suicide rate is in the wealthiest suburb. So the more money you earn, the more likely it is that you'll kill yourself.
Yeah, that's so. I mean,
that surprises people.
It does. It does.
I'd be happy if I was rich.
Yeah, they think that, and I the nature of doing the interviews I do, and with the people that I do, many of whom are very considered what Western society believes is successful, and they share their deepest vulnerabilities on my show. So I've gotten over it a long time ago, thinking, oh, Dr. So-and-so would never. That's just not true. Because they come on here and share, and it's wonderful that they do. But I was thinking about filling out an intake form. I today could fill out an intake form and say, check a box that yes, I've been suicidal. But at the times that I really was suicidal, I would not have checked that box. It'd take more than a box on a piece of paper to get me to say what's going on, because my family absolutely knows how to pretend, Academy Award winning pretend, like everything is absolutely hunky-dory to the outside world. And I learned how to do that from a very young age, and that is not what was going on at home. So you have to think about, how do we reach the people that were like me, who learned this from a very young age, that I'm not going to be checking a box. It would have taken somebody saying, Kristin, are you suicidal right now? Seriously, promise me you're not going to do anything, like you said, Paul. It would take something like that for me to probably start crying and admit it. Someone having the wherewithal to say it like that to me, to kind of shake me up and get past my very huge wall for me to get into it. So I guess what I'm saying, listeners, those of you that are getting into therapy, friends of people that, are this way, ask the question. I mean, just ask it and be serious, because this is not something to be taken lightly. So if somebody isn't and they're mildly offended, oh well, move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I tell my clients, when you're clinically depressed, then you're bound. I say almost everybody that gets, clinically depressed, serotonin depleted, has thoughts of you wish you could die. Do you have those too? In other words, I'm making it acceptable for them instead of
Excellent.
making them feel like they're the only ones.
Melanie, you were
people get don't exist messages too. We need when we with our mate, with our friends, when we're raising kids especially, it's important that we don't give people don't exist messages, because like if somebody if a father keeps promising his child, well, okay, we'll do that Saturday, yeah, I'll do that with you tomorrow, and then you always back out, then you're saying don't exist. And
Right.
if you if a child goes up to his parent and wants to talk, and they're busy reading the sports page or something, they brush them aside. There's a lot of subtle ways you can give people don't exist messages, and then if they get enough of them, then they tend to incorporate them, and they almost feel like
Internalize it.
they need to
Yeah.
commit suicide to fulfill what they've been told to do.
I've not heard that term, Paul. I like that, the don't exist messages. That's a powerful way to put it. And I think it would really, help clients articulate their feelings. And I feel like that's one of our biggest, I guess, walls we have to climb when it comes to suicide prevention and suicide awareness and education, is that I feel like our society is not well manned with words to describe our feelings, so that I love that do not exist messages. I think that's a great way to say it. So
Yeah, because
I
they
think
can change their
sometimes,
mind. They can
yeah,
change their mind and decide, well, you know what, I have had those messages, and by golly, I'm going to decide that I am going to
That
exist.
I exist. Yeah,
Yeah, you
exactly.
got to convince people that their life is worth living.
yes, definitely. And I think too, sometimes you start to have the messages in your head before you get to the point of suicide ideation. So, because I think a lot of the messages are very much the same, and that, it might be, I don't want to be here anymore. I just want to disappear. I just want to fall into a hole. I just want to go to sleep. And sometimes you haven't gotten to the point that you're thinking about committing suicide, but I think a lot of times those sayings are things that eventually lead to that. And we all know that cognitively, if you're constantly on that loop of thinking those things, then your brain is just going to continue to take you there.
Hi, this is Dr. Paul Meier of the Meijer Clinics. Our Christian counselors across the country have a goal of helping all those who come to us to become what God has called them to be. If you're in a situation where you're not at peace within yourself, or you just feel like there's joy that's missing in your life, we can come alongside to help you obtain peace and joy.
This message is sponsored by the Meijer Clinic Foundation, a nonprofit Christian counseling ministry. The number is 1-888-7-CLINIC, 1-888-7-CLINIC.
Yeah.
Maybe identifying those types of things and helping people articulate exactly what they feel could help, because I think that's one of the biggest pieces of suicide, and that is that people just don't want to feel pain anymore.
Yes.
And that's one of the biggest reasons that I feel like people do it, because they're just exhausted and they're so tired and overwhelmed by the amount of pain they feel, and they don't know how to get rid of it. And so they see that as their only way out. And I think another thing too is that a lot of people that may have complex PTSD or have been in a lot of trauma, they see the world, they believe, their innermost being believes that the world is not a safe place.
Yes.
Right.
The smartest way for them to be safe is to not be here anymore. And that is their logic of thinking. Well, if this is such an unsafe place, and it always has been for me, then the best thing for me to do to protect myself is just to not be here anymore. And when you've been in complex trauma, that makes sense, you know?
Yeah. Factors, and all three of us have been studying suicide things today, and I was feeling pretty happy before I started preparing for this program, but man, when it's sad when you lose somebody to suicide. But several factors. I'm going to read just something real briefly here. Several factors that increase the risk of suicide. Of course, depression, we've mentioned that, feelings of loneliness or helplessness, alcohol or drug addiction. Anybody that abuses pain meds, we've talked about, at least, the heroin, opioid crisis, or anyone, if we took 100 happy people and made them drink a bottle of wine a night, then maybe 5 or 10 would commit suicide, or maybe 3 or 4, but maybe half of them would get clinically depressed, because alcohol is a depressant. It lowers your serotonin, makes you depressed. So drinking more than 2 glasses a day of wine or 2 strong drinks or 4 beers a day can make somebody become suicidal, even if their life is fine otherwise. A family history of abuse or suicide in the family makes it more likely that other people will do it the same way or do the same thing. Violence in the home, a recent loss such as a breakup, parents going through a divorce, different things. Being bullied, that's those don't exist messages.
Yep.
Or even worse than don't exist is I hope you exist so I can bully you and use you as a punching bag. That would be even worse than don't exist messages. Fear of ridicule for getting psychiatric or counseling help. If people have lost a close friend to suicide, then it makes them more likely to think about it. In America, we talked about World Suicide Day. Here in America, something like 40% of people who commit suicide do it with a gun, and there's a lot wider access to guns here. And so people say, well, if we threw away all the guns, it would eliminate a lot of suicides. But in reality, the countries in Europe, and I studied that today, the countries in Europe that don't have guns have a suicide rate that's almost double what it is in America. They still commit suicide. They just use other methods other than guns. So it's not the guns that kill people. It's people that kill people. You've heard that before. But women, girls and women attempt suicide a lot more than men do, but a lot more men die of it than women. So it's like twice as many women attempt it as men, but twice as many men die of it as women because men use more violent means to attempt it. So those are just some factors that make it more likely that people will be suicidal.
I think too, a reminder for all of us, go to therapy. I mean, there's so much going on in the world right now. If you're in the United States and you're listening, it doesn't matter where you're listening. We have people listening, from all over the world, but there's a lot going on in this world. Life is stressful. Get some counseling. Seriously. I mean, I've had people come to me and say, well, I come to you to get counseling. And I'm like, listen, I am not a licensed counselor. I go to therapy every week. And sometimes when people come to me and they want that out of me, it's draining for me. And I'm now getting better about saying, you know what? I love you. I really do. But you need to do what I do, which is take personal responsibility for what's going on in your life and go to a counselor and work on this stuff. So, there's a lot of preventative measures that we can all take personal responsibility for by getting ourselves into counseling and working on some of our stuff. Because a lot of people that commit suicide or die by suicide are people who just haven't dealt with their stuff, and so they finally hit a breaking point. It's not that this one trauma just happened. It's a lifetime of stuff over and over and over again that they never dealt with, they never processed, they never got help, for. And then one more thing happens and they just snap and can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And so really, truly go and get some counseling, because you got to get this stuff out of yourself, out of your mouth, out of your heart, out of your soul, with someone that can help you in a safe environment get it out.
And I'll tell you right now, we decided before we even started doing the podcast today that we want this not to just be sharing all the things. You need to know the sad things. You need to know what can cause it and all that. But we want to offer some hope too.
Yes.
I've been practicing psychiatry for 42 years now, and I've never met a suicidal patient that we couldn't get over it. I've never met one that we couldn't get over it if they would cooperate and do the things they need to do. And we see, I admit people, everyone that comes to our day program, for example, that's where they come 7 hours a day, 5 days a week for about 3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks. I do the workup on every single one of them. I saw somebody today, and I see them for about an hour or longer, and and most of the people that are real depressed do have death wishes, either passive or active, and they all, usually within a week to 10 days, the suicidal thoughts are gone, and within about 3 weeks, the depression is gone or far enough gone so they can finish up on an outpatient basis. But what we do, I'll tell you what we do that cures them, and it may surprise you. I tell people when they come in, they're already feeling really sad, and I say, well, you're going to be in a loving environment. Our counselors are very loving and kind, but they're going to dig. We're going to dig and probe and get you to. We're going to try to get you to cry every day. What? Yeah. In order to get well, we need to get you to talk about the things that you're sad about and that you're angry about and feel guilty about, and so we dig and probe, and we get people to talk about if they've been abused or raped or whatever, talk about it, and put an empty chair in front of them and imagine the person being there and tell them off, and then their self-talk. If they put themselves down and have those don't exist messages in their own brains, we convince them that they can make new decisions. They don't have to obey the things that the baloney that they were taught by others. You can make re-decisions, we call it. You decided when you were young and your parents or somebody told you were worthless, you decided they were right. But now that you're grown up, you can make re-decisions and decide, what, they were wrong.
Yeah.
They were lying. They didn't know. They knew they were lying, or they just, were crazy or something. But you can make your own new decisions in life, and when you do those things and share, and other people listen to you, and they, you're sharing in group therapy, and people are crying with you, and you get well. I mean, when you get it out in the open and talk about it and make new decisions about how to survive, then in the meantime, we use medications too to help, and that helps speed up the recovery. I do want to say one thing about medications, because a lot of people are afraid of them. Well, I'm afraid to put my teenager on an antidepressant because it might cause them to commit suicide. Well, here's what happens. If you got 100,000 teenagers that were suicidal and they didn't get any antidepressant, then maybe out of that 100,000, 1,000 of them or more would die of suicide. If they all took an antidepressant, then there'd probably only be 200 instead of 1,000 that committed suicide, and so then people misinterpret that and say, well, in 200 people it caused suicide. No, it didn't. They committed suicide even though they got on an antidepressant. It didn't. Right. It's not the antidepressant that caused the suicide. In a very few cases, there are some people that teenagers included that may have bipolar disorder or something that hasn't shown up yet. And when you take an antidepressant, it can make those people, it can make it show up, and at that moment, and it would have shown up sooner or later anyway, but it can make it. And so in rare cases, it could make it more likely that somebody would. So I don't want to say it never does, but
Well,
you're a lot safer taking an antidepressant than you are not taking one if you're suicidal.
And thank goodness now we have genetic testing.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, the ability to see what absolutely isn't going to work because you've done a genetic test can also and does increase the success rate of medication. I mean, especially when we're dealing with, with mental illness. So I'm so happy that we're at that place now where we can do that, and physicians have access to those kinds of tests so that they can treat more effectively,
Yeah, we have a lot of good tools. I mean, Kristin, you were talking about counseling and therapy, and sometimes people just don't have access to that, whether it be financial, they may not have insurance. The point being is that talk to someone, talk to someone at your church. If you don't have any friends, and a lot of times these are the people that end up dying by suicide because they do feel so isolated, then I dare say if you went and sat down at the table with a stranger and said, I need someone to talk to. I really need some help. They would probably sit there and talk to you. Now, I know a lot of people that are having suicide ideation are not likely to go sit down with a stranger. Point being, if you just talk to someone, even if it's someone
That's
that
what
you
those
really,
hotlines are so
yeah,
great for.
hotlines or a friend from high school, we've got social media now, reach out to someone. And here's the other piece of it that I feel like those of us that are well of mind and not having suicide ideation, if we see someone that's isolated, like in high school, you read the wonderful stories about someone going and sitting with the person that's never sat with. Don't leave people out. If you know someone that has just lost family members or has cut their family off for whatever reason, if you know anyone that is isolated, maybe it's an elderly person, do something, reach out. Sometimes that's the one thing that might save them is literally just you attempting to do something. Because I really do believe that isolation is a big
Oh yeah.
piece of, and I part of what the part of what you asking a person if they have suicide ideation is that as soon as those words come out of your mouth, they are no longer alone in those thoughts
That's right.
because so far they've been alone in their head with it. And as soon as you say it, even if they deny it, as soon as you say it, they're not alone in it anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
what you said just triggered a memory of something I read about 2 hours ago, that the highest suicide, one of the very highest suicide rates, is in white males over 85 years old who
Yeah.
are alone in the world.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's really high.
Yeah.
And so it's not just teenagers that attempt. They do attempt suicide more than adults do, but a lot of adults, especially the elderly, are also more likely to commit suicide. And I think the reason rich people tend to do it is they think growing up and even as adults that success will bring happiness, and that
Mhm.
your net worth is the same as your self worth and things like that. And in reality, the only thing that really brings happiness is loving and being loved by God and a couple of other people and by yourself. In fact, they asked Jesus, "What's the greatest commandment?" And he said, "If you obey this one, you'll automatically obey the other 365 that there are." Yeah, and that's to love God and love your neighbor as you love yourself. So you need to love. You need to decide to love yourself and be your own
Yeah.
best friend. It's not the same as vanity and narcissism
No.
to have a healthy love for yourself, but you need to decide, I'm going to be my own best friend, and I'm going to take care of me, and then you need to have somebody else that you can share your gut level feelings with, even the death wishes, and so you need to love others, love God, love yourself. And one other thing that is real important before we run out of time is survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
That I see people that are really, really depressed because their mate or their child or somebody committed suicide, and they often blame themselves. And I explain to them, when somebody's serotonin is low, they're in such pain that suicide seems logical. It makes it become logical, even when it's not logical. So they're in such pain, and when your serotonin is low, you feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. It's never going to go away. I'm going to spend the rest of my life in this much pain, and I can't tolerate it. And so suicide becomes logical, and they if they would have gotten themselves help and gotten on medication to at least restore their serotonin to normal so they could go get some counseling and work on the issues that depleted it in the first place, then they would have gotten over it. And even people, a research study that we've quoted before, even people that got assisted suicides, they signed up for assisted suicides in I think it's Oregon that allows it. There's one
Mhm.
state out there, and they persuaded a number of them to go ahead and get some help first, and then if they still wanted assisted suicide, they were free to do it. And out of the ones that got help and got medication and counseling, about 80% of them changed their minds because they
Mm.
just didn't realize that there was hope. So there is hope. I
Yeah.
want people out there to know that there is hope. 100% of people can get over depression if they get the right kind of help.
Yeah, and here's hope. Here's, a hope piece here, people. The reason we do this show, this is why we're a different kind of mental health show, because we talk about everybody, not just, the expert that I may be interviewing. Everybody gets deep. At least that's where we try to go. I just told someone that I wasn't going to air their show, but they were welcome to come back on because their show was like a commercial for the place that they work. And that's not what our show is about. So you either got to come on here and you got to get deep. You don't read me your curriculum vitae, if that's how you say that. That's not what this show is about. So even if you're a counselor, you better come on here and expect to talk about the human condition, because somebody out there, listeners who've listened for 5 years, Lord, thank you and help you, because I know you've heard my stories 100 times already, but it's for the new people that just tuned in and go, oh, they're talking about this kind of stuff. I'm not alone. That's why we do this. And the hope around feeling good about yourself, that self-love, it absolutely is so true. Because when you get to that other side, and I'm speaking from someone who has gotten to that other side where you start to care about yourself, I actually get a little angry, even sometimes more than angry, now when I don't take care of myself, because I like myself. I think I'm a valuable human being. And so I get upset when I take 3 steps back on how much I've built up in terms of my self-care. And that's phenomenal. That's where we all should want to be.
It's a 24/7 with your self-care.
That's right.
You know, I read an article, and I want to give these because I think they're real positive. The article was written by a woman named Jocelyn Leo, and it was featured on The Mighty, which has a lot of articles about mental health, if our listeners want to check that out. And she is actually a survivor of suicide attempt. And she made a list of 8 things that helped her after her suicide attempts. And I just wanted to read those really quickly. Number 1 is find your safe people. We talked about that earlier. Find your safe people. Her second one was create something out of the pain. And she talked about how even in her most painful moments, she tried to draw. Even if she just like threw an egg at the wall, she still felt like she was creating something. It's a way to get the pain out. You're ridding yourself of the pain. Go to a safe place. So even if it's just the park, even if it's a store that you really loved when you were a child, anywhere that you can think of that you felt safe, go there. Get a weighted blanket, which I love this because a lot of times I think we just think that weighted blankets are for people with sensory processing disorder, but that is not the case. A weighted blanket can do wonders because it
What
gives
is that? I've never heard of that. What's a weighted blanket?
It's literally a blanket that has weights in it so that when you put it on, it's like you're getting a hug. It's pressure.
Oh,
Yeah.
where do you get those?
Yeah.
Where do you get one? I guess you could just look online, right?
Type in weighted blanket and bing, bang, boom, pop right up. They're amazing.
That's cool. That's cool. I never heard of that.
You know what happens when you release all sorts of good chemicals when you get a hug, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Keep notes from your safe people. So if you suffer from depression or you're having suicide ideation, she had a little set of notes that she kept by her bedside table from some of her friends that were just funny or affirming quotes. Number 6 was make list. And those were just list of random things that list of things that she remembered from childhood, a list of pretty flowers that she liked. That was just something that kind of got her head out of the negative thinking. Number 7 was something you did today, Kristin, go for a walk. Number 8, find things to look forward to. Some people don't know how to build a life where they have things to look forward to. That is a skill.
Oh, yeah.
It's a skill.
I had years of not knowing how to do that.
Because some people grow up and they had things to look forward to all the time, so they already understand what that means. But some people grew up and they literally had nothing but disaster to look forward to. They have no idea how to create things in their life that can bring them joy and happiness. So this is a real skill and something that could help you learn how to do. Obviously, you're not going to be doing these things when you're in the midst of active suicide ideation, but this was a list of things that she felt like kept her from getting back to the point where
Right.
she was having active suicide thoughts.
Yeah.
And kind of coping.
Get in a group. Get in some sort of group. It might be a sport group or a card playing group. I've been in a card playing monthly where we get together monthly, and it could be a Sunday school group. In a study in the Journal of the American Medical Association on 90,000 teenagers that were active in a church youth group had a much lower suicide rate than kids that didn't do that. So get in a Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, adults, celebrate recovery. If you can't afford therapy, you can go to a Celebrate Recovery. Google that. There's one in every town. If there's 100 of them in Dallas, probably different Celebrate Recovery groups, and you can go to those and they're free. And volunteers that have training do those, and a lot of people, that helps a lot of people. But getting some sort of group, because that helps you to have something to look forward to if you're in some sort of fun group.
You know, a real interesting statistic I found today, and of course, when I read it, I was like, well, of course, people that own pets are a lot less likely to commit suicide.
Yes.
Amen.
You're not
Amen.
ready. If you're not ready for people, and sometimes when you have complex PTSD, you're just like not ready for people because you've just been wounded, go adopt a pet. There's so many cats and dogs that need to be adopted from your local shelter. Sometimes, in fact, most of the time, they have free adoption something, once every 6 months or something, or you can get someone to sponsor your adoption on their website. And so you're still able to get your animal for free.
Well,
And,
you know what else you can do? Because I was not in a position when I was a teenager to, get my own pet, obviously. So I did my own little version of rent a pet.
yeah,
I went to neighbors, anybody that I saw had a dog and they work full time, and I was like, I'll take your dog for a walk. You don't even have to pay me.
That's
I was
cool.
like the favorite kid in the entire neighborhood, and I lived at some of these people's houses. My house was not safe in any way, shape, or form. And so my safe space was all these houses with all these animals, and it was awesome. So, even as an adult, you can walk someone's dog. Man, it makes such a huge, and people that work full time, they'll let you walk their dog. I promise you, they will let you.
I thought seriously about writing a book called Things You Can Learn from Yorkies. Really, I've thought about that seriously. I've got a little Yorkie that I've had for about 11 years now, and she's only about 7 pounds big, as an 11-year-old.
Paul, do
And I've got one, and my wife's got one. They sleep with us at night and everything. And when you get home, they're wagging their tail so much, their butt end is almost falling over, because they're so happy to see you. And when I do feel sad, some days I'll hear enough sad stories that I'll come home and I'll just plop down in my chair and feel really sad myself for them. And if my little Gracie sees me looking sad, she'll come right over and lick my foot until I pick her up. And then she'll lick my hand, and
Yep.
they can sense it. They can sense it.
Absolutely.
They have unconditional love.
You love writing books, Paul, and we should do this. Don't have it be about Yorkies. Just have it be about dogs.
Yeah,
and everybody.
dogs.
I will write a chapter about border collies.
What
Melanie
you can learn from
write
dogs.
one about. You can write your chapter about Yorkies. Well, we can find different people that can talk about the breed.
A really good book. Yeah, what you can learn from Yorkies, what you can learn from golden retrievers, what you can learn from beagles. That'd be such a fun book.
I think it would be. I would actually write that chapter. In a hot minute.
Because dogs are a lot better than people at a lot of things, including unconditional love.
Oh my
They
gosh,
love
the
you no matter
number,
what. They
the
love you no matter
number,
what.
the number of people that cried into Miles's neck. I'm not even kidding you. That dog has had, because of, we went to, psych wards and mental health hospitals and nursing homes. People laid on the floor with a sheet over them and would only let Miles dig his way under the sheet and cuddle with them.
Very
I mean,
sweet.
it's amazing. I got to witness this all the time, and
I used to
just,
take my Yorkie to work every Friday to make rounds on the people that were in the day program, and
Oh,
so I'd have Gracie sit on their lap while I was chatting with each one, about how they're doing that day and whether we need to change their meds or things like that. It's amazing what a
Mhm.
therapeutic influence they have. People look forward to the coming Friday to have a little therapy session from Gracie.
That's right.
that's awesome. Yay, what a great way to end the show on a high
That's
note.
right.
Go,
On a
go
high
adopt
note.
a cat or dog. Go
Go
adopt.
walk one for a neighbor, do it. Yeah, anything. Go somewhere where there's a therapy dog, an emotional support animal. So,
Mhm.
yes. So, I'm glad that we could talk about this. I'm glad we went there as we always do, and that we ended the show on, on a hope-filled note. So, thank you both.
Yep.
Thank you.
And thanks to our listening family for another edition of Roundtable Discussions with Dr. Paul Meier on Mental Health News Radio. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. Tune in next time for another engaging discussion on relevant mental health topics. If you have any questions about Meijer Clinics, please visit our website at meierclinics.com. That's MEIER clinics.com, or call us at 888-7-CLINIC. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or any of your favorite podcast apps. And please note that we are a member of and produced by Mental Health News Radio Network, MHNRnetwork.com.